start this recording and just kind of get into it. And yeah, we're doing elements of poker. Just an introduction about it. Tommy Angelo has his own website, a very kind of famous poker coach, one of the very first few ones. He's found online at the Tommy Angelo on Twitter. The one thing that may be helpful for doing this book, if you're doing it, through Audible or something like that, is he has a starting hands chart that's available on his website here. USHC is Universal Starting Hands Chart. He talks about the three things, if there is a plot line to this book, it's that, we're going to talk about tilt, we're going to talk about position, and we're going to talk about individualness, which is, sort of how we relate to all these things on a personal level. So yeah, Tommy is a player, a coach, and an author. I don't know if you guys are the same as me and the same as Tommy, but we all found poker at a pretty young age. Grew up in a family that used to play like hearts and spades and poker and everything like that. So Tommy is the same way and I am, in that he's known poker for a long time, but he says in the book that he never really had the money to dabble in it until he was as a teenager. Poker's always been a constant for him. He's been a musician, he's played bridge, a bunch of other games, chess and everything, but poker has been a constant. And this book should be viewed as essentially like an accelerator for what his coaching is. It goes over a lot of kind of like language and concepts that are pretty important to have as a general kind of level as a poker player. So just real quick, I wasn't sure, you guys have both read this, but how did you come to read this book in your poker career, and kind of like what was your relationship with Tommy Angelo? Did you know who he was when you heard about this book, or how did it come to you?
Well, I first met Tommy Angelo playing in the No Limit Hold'em game at Artichoke Joe's in 1998. So
that's amazing. That is very cool, Alan. Was he good? Was he a good player at the time? Did he have like a good table presence, or was he kind of like?
He was a good player. He was obviously a pro, and there was obviously one of the better players in the game, and his buddy Alex Roberts was in the game also, and Alex and I butted heads and hands a couple of times. Mostly I stayed out of Tommy's way. And funny story, friends of mine who had a email list about Bay Area poker set up a home game once, and I was eager to go play with my friends and dabble in things like Pot Limit Omaha and like that. And I showed up at the friend's house, and I noticed one of the players was Tommy, and we kind of nodded at each other and smiled. And I was thinking, what were they thinking inviting Tommy to this game?
Yeah, for sure. Well, what a dream. Can you imagine being that good and then getting invited to games like that? I mean, yeah. Oh my gosh, that'd just be incredible. That's so cool.
Yeah, I almost feel guilty not knowing of him. I didn't know of him until fairly recently with pokercoaching.com and then Brad's interview and such. But when I first heard about his stuff, everybody seems to know who he was, but he always seemed to have like that kind of almost the hippie kind of Zen thing, which is cool, but never really grasped me, really grabbed onto me. This is the first time I didn't even read it. I listened to the book. But hearing him narrate his own book, it was like just the way it started with his relationship with poker and the way that yeah. this guy is awesome. Like,
yeah,
he is.
It's great.
He was so far ahead of like his time in terms of like just kind of like being dialed back or more into like meditation and Eastern philosophy, and not kind of like as dialed in. And so, yeah, like when this guy first came on the scene in my world in terms of like poker coaching and everything like that, he was introducing stuff that was just like so zen and so cool, but he had this way of like making it so relatable and enjoyable, because he is just an awesome writer as well and everything too. But like, yeah, this whole like aura of Tommy is just like just very, very cool, for sure. And Alan, that's amazing that you know, he talks about that at the start of the book. Like he was the best player in his home game, I think of Indiana maybe, and then he just like sacked up and he went to like, you know, California to just start playing and testing his metal and everything like that.
Mhm.
So
Well, he moved to California because he got busted in Ohio for running a home game.
oh yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. So exactly. So kind of like once that happens, you know, you gotta I guess you gotta move out west and
Mhm.
be a bit more legal.
What was the name of that game, Alan? Or
What
that place that you met him
the
at?
playing, it's still there. It's called Artichoke Joe's
That is
Casino
such a
in San
poker
Bruno,
story.
California on and it's like a century old.
Oh, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Of course, been rebuilt and renovated a number of times, but
That's
there
cool.
was this no limit hold'em game that had been, because I had been playing no limit draw poker before 1987 when hold'em was legalized in California, and when they when they put hold'em in there, they had limit hold'em, of course, but they also had a no limit game, and that game had been going for 20 no 87 to 10 years at that point. And there was a pool of players who were very good for the time, and there was a
Yeah.
pool of players who were eager to play, and I was one of the eager to play players, but I was doing things like reading Super System and Bob Giafoni's book on big bet poker, and I was able to hold my own.
That's pretty amazing at the time to be part of like living history, essentially there to watch like that transition take hold and everything like that. And just, yeah, I mean, to see the genesis of essentially some of these games get rolled out, as, you know, as Tommy calls it, like table poker has always been kind of like the bread and butter, but to watch the actual transformation in like, you know, to switch away from limit into no limit, it's just amazing because, yeah, like the entire ecosystem, you know, to
It's a
people
whole new
nowadays to know it
world.
was all limit is just kind of crazy.
Alex's best friend, Tommy's best friend, Alex Roberts, around 2010 or so, I ran into him playing 3060 Hold'em at the Oaks Club. And he told me what he felt about the poker boom was that in the year 2000, he was one of the 20 best no limit Hold'em players in the world, he said. And now in 2010, he wasn't even in the top 1,000.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Oh man, it makes me think about other games where money's kind of like being spent on stuff like this, where people have no idea and like what is the edge and everything like that. And I mean, yeah, that stuff is out there. Who knows what it is exactly? But my God, like I don't know. I'm glad that we all have like a commonality in poker because it is just such an engrossing and fun game on so many levels. So yeah, it really like draws you in.
And it's not the game. The game I'm playing is not the game I was playing 20 years ago.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Hey, can you imagine draw no limit? I mean, my
Oh,
goodness.
I've even played it, but
Yeah.
it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my pockets are quite not deep enough. Um, so before going into kind of what he considers some of like the universal elements of poker, Tommy is big on words and languages and definition having a lot of meaning. So he pretty explicitly goes into just how important it is to talk about poker language and understanding of an ideas because you know it's a mathematical game where all the concepts though are then explained, you know, through language. So Tommy has some words that he's sort of come up with himself that are used throughout this game. So he talks about A game and C game, which for me is a very kind of easy to understand thing now, but it was revolutionary when I first heard it. In that your A game is kind of like your best game, your mental and you know physical playing, and your understanding of the game. And your C game is kind of trash, and your B game is when you're not at A game or B game. And sometimes, you know, the way to become a more consistent A game, you know, crusher is just get rid of aspects of C game. So it's just kind of one idea of how poker language can help us understand things better. So he talks about Mo and Joe as an example of A game and C game. Mo is a great player, and Mo also has issues where um, he's either the best player at the table or he's tilting hard. And at the other time, we have Joe, or excuse me, Joe is the best one who also tilts hard. So his A game's really good and his C game's terrible. And you also have Mo, who's like, essentially he's just B game all the time. When he's winning, he's like a small loser. And when he's tilting and playing his worst, he's only slightly worse than that. So at the end of the day, how do you help a Mo and a Joe, whose A games and C games are vastly different? It's a good way to understand kind of like the context of where you're at in your poker journey. Everyone has our A games for certain things, and everyone has a C game for certain things as well. I'll explain a little bit more that he talks about in terms of words and terms, but I'm definitely curious about what your guys' relationship with poker language is. I think there's like a really lot to talk about there. But Tommy talks about how poker is essentially a tree, and essentially, the one tree has always been live table poker, sitting down playing with people. That's always been poker. It's always how it started. But now we have different limbs that are growing out of the tree. We have like online poker, and we have tournament poker, which never used to be sit down and play at the table and try to beat a man out of all of its money. Tournaments were a growth out of the table poker. And then, he considers branches to be a bunch of the variants. So Tommy himself, he talks a little bit about how he himself essentially coined the term cutoff, which I didn't realize, so the positional term cutoff. He talks about how thrilled he is to identify other kind of words and things like that, like monotone and rainbow and two-tone. So poker, as very much the conveyance of ideas through language, is super important. And I wasn't sure if you guys had any kind of words or terms that immediately jumped out to your mind as being very relevant or helpful when you're kind of learning about poker or going through trying to explain any sort of concept or understanding of a hand. Um, if you guys had any good examples.
Yeah, I like like you said, the fact that he coined a lot of these was history in a bottle kind of thing. It was like, holy shit, that's where that came from kind of moments. Those are really cool. It weighed heavily on me because finding Brad on pokercoaching.com, what struck me was he was introducing language that was necessary but didn't exist yet. It was like, why doesn't this exist? Like, it's how to communicate this particular thing or this particular thing. Brad was bringing these to the table in his webinars on poker coaching. And I think it's profound because it's like language is important, but necessary language is even more important. Not just making up fancy words for stuff, but stuff that actually communicates a very specific decision in the decision tree type stuff.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Yeah. Like the core of an idea, if you don't like, it's so nice that we have basically common words to kind of get to the point of where we want to be in an explanation. Because otherwise people would have like no idea of, there's just so many things. Like I think about like polar versus non-polar and blockers versus, I don't really like the word not like non-blockers or unblockers, because I just think it's like not a blocker. I don't know. But language is like extremely important for all this stuff. And it was very cool to see that Tommy had helped craft and create words that have been used like millions of times for in the poker ecosystem.
Well, he was an influential poster on 2+2 in the early aughts, and a lot of his what he came up with, he's great with words, obviously, and a lot of what he came up with caught on.
Yeah, no doubt. He has a bunch of other words. I'll just rattle off real quick that I didn't really ever take over, but I mean things like bubble out did, but slow rolling may or not been hers, fast rolling, kind of things like that. He talks about some funny terms like fluct, which means fluctuation got you down, where you're in a poop spot, you're passively out of position.
That one stuck with me.
I feel like I'm in that spot a lot, but yeah, there's definitely like language is so important, and it was really cool to both see Tommy recognize that and to see his contributions along the line through words and terms. So I'm going to move on into some of the elements of poker, and just going into this, I mean, I'm not going to cover every single one. So any of the ones that you guys kind of want to talk about and have pop up that that were very relevant to you or anything like that, go ahead. But just to cover some of the more major stuff, he does talk about A, B, and C game, and it's kind of a major revelation on some ways if you just simply categorize something. How did you do today? Were you playing your A game or your B game or your C game? And knowing what that is for you, and knowing what your other facets of your game are, say your C game, and how to improve all those things. If we can use language to start sort of categorizing those things, it's extremely important. And there's an A, B, and C game for everything. Like, moving into the next topic of quitting, you can have an A game of quitting, right? That was something that never kind of really even made sense to me along the way. Is I thought a quitting decision was just a quitting decision. I didn't know much about like a good quit versus a bad quit. Sometimes I felt like, oh, if I'm out of cash or if I'm really pissed off, maybe I, shut the program down, or I, leave the table and that's done. And that's a bad quit. But realistically, if we're practicing our A game, then we should have an A game level of quitting, right? To make the best quitting decision we can. So there's a lot of in this book that goes into quitting. He talks about what a good quit is, and then how do we define essentially what a good quit may be by knowing what a worse quit is. And if we're at the point where we're thinking we're having a good quit and maybe we play and win a little bit more, what is the EV gain or the practical gain of winning a little bit more versus what is like sort of the catastrophic emotional component of when you're at a quitting point and you keep playing and then you end up like getting bad beat a bunch and you walk away from the table like broke basically, or just really pissed off about a hand. And that would be a bad quit. That would be a bad circumstance. Where we can kind of define what a good quit would be is if we're ready to walk and we know like a loss past that point would be devastating, while a small amount more money wouldn't really mean much to us. That's kind of like what a good quit is. And the way that Tommy says that we can kind of get to this point and recognize what our quitting ability is just by taking breaks a lot more often. In live poker, I was always kind of good at taking breaks. I just thought it was nice every once in a while to go and just walk around the casino, go to the bathroom, like just hang out for a little bit and just take a little bit of an orbit off. I didn't realize that was essentially very difficult for some people to do once they're down in, at the tables grinding, like maybe they never want to get up at all. So, I wouldn't really consider myself a great quitter because I didn't actually kind of think about it too much. I just kind of thought like, oh, I'm feeling like quitting. So now it's kind of the quitting time. So it was nice to hear some what other systems are around this, and just, asking you two guys, how do you feel about quitting? Do you have any rules that you live by in terms of quitting? Do you think you're a good quitter, or are you the kind of guy there who's there till the end of the night trying to get, stuck or unstuck or just wanting more action kind of thing like that?
Well, I feel like I'm kind of a lousy quitter and have worked out some systems to compensate for that.
Systems are important. Yeah, for sure. Like what?
And the basic one is to play for fixed periods of time. Like my local card room has just opened up this month and I haven't been playing regularly there yet. But before COVID, I was going there like 3-4 days a week, 6 hours at a time. And I show up at noon, I quit at 6.
Okay.
And have fixed starting and stopping times.
I think that's a great way to do it.
And there's a particular interesting problem that comes up for me, is that if I'm stuck on a day where I'm playing 6 hours and just like say it's an hour till quitting time, and I'm stuck enough that there's not much likelihood of me getting back to even in the remaining hour, I lose my motivation to play, because what's the point? I'm not going to get even. why should I keep playing? And that's actually a kind of a discipline thing. Maybe I should get up then and there, but I do have a win rate in that game, and I should stick around for a while, if not to get even, to get something back. So that's a peculiar quitting problem I have.
That sounds all too kind of normal though. Or yeah, like, well, it's better that, if you don't think that you're going to get back to even or unstuck or whatever, I could see that time crunch also being as a reason to kind of go haywire and become looser or more aggressive when you're on some sort of time crunch. So yeah, I can definitely see how that can work out itself to be kind of disadvantageous to have like a hard time quitting rule. Yeah, it's like at the end of the night, nobody wants like the party to end. So people can kind of get a little crazy kind of when they're faced with hard constraints like that. But I mean, at the overall end of it though, it's nice to know that, yeah, exactly. Like you're not going to be compromising yourself too much in that circumstance where you can just realize that, hey, this game's always here. I can, pick up now and come back tomorrow. And I'm in the exact same spot, right? On some level.
And sometimes when the game is really, really, really good, I have to decide whether or not it's worthwhile to break my time rule. And I have a guideline for that is if I am playing over my time, I absolutely have to have an exit strategy.
That's fair.
Don't just keep playing. I'm going to keep playing. I'm going to keep playing till 10 o'clock rather than 6 o'clock, or I'm going to keep playing until I win this much, or I'm going to keep playing only until
the fish busts or something like that.
The
right?
fish busts or something. Yeah, exactly. But always have something to keep the game closed-ended. So I'm not just continuing to play.
Our minds work a lot better with, I think, when we govern things like that and we put limits around what we're supposed to do, because then that offers up like, well, yeah, I'm going to be here till 10 or whatever. Or, like that guy still has money on the table and he's the worst player I've ever seen. So I'm going to keep playing, until, his money's all gone or whatever. Because, yeah, I think that being flexible with that is really important because it just,
but flexible with limits.
Flexible with limits. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. You can't for your own sake, you can't just kind of constantly be violating your own rules and everything like that, your own original kind of system and guideline for quittings. But yeah, sometimes the game's really good, or sometimes, yeah, you're playing really good and you just want to keep going. So I definitely understand that. So moving on, I thought this was really interesting because a lot of this book is actually looked at through the lens of reciprocality, which is basically, Tommy defines it as when basically two people are doing something different, the money is going to start flowing in one direction because these people are doing different things. So the reciprocality is the difference between opponents that causes sort of money to change hands between them. And I thought this is like just super interesting because you can look at it from an on-table perspective and an off-table perspective, and you can look at it from every single like betting decision, and you can also look at it as just, your overall strategy and how you approach the game and your overall sort of like life EV decisions and everything like that. So I thought this is just like a really, really cool way to talk about poker, was through reciprocality. And he talks a lot about it later on as it goes on throughout the book of just tilting to reciprocality and betting reciprocality and everything like that. Ian, was this something that was familiar to you at all, or was this kind of like newer after Tommy introduced it? Because it was all new to me. So
I like that you brought it up as a profound thing, because for me it was this one word was like a microcosm of what I really, really dug about this guy, because reciprocality sounds super scientific. but he's talking about one of the oldest and most fundamental things in the universe. I mean, depending on what you're into, but that's a yin yang principle. There's a yin for every yang. That's
Yeah.
kind of what he's, and
Cause and effect.
it's real artsy, that type of thing, but he says reciprocality. So it's like, wait, I don't have to, have bells in my hands and smell like and smell like patchouli and be into that sort of thing. I can be into what he's saying, but still understand it as like a reciprocality. Okay, that resonates with me. I'm not a hippie, but that concept is what he's talking about. I love that. That was just the perfect blend for me when he used that term.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, I felt the same way. Like that kind of like level of understanding that I got through that like word and term and everything like that was huge, because it was like, oh my God, this does apply to so many decisions. And it really like breaks it down in a very simple way of, if the other guy's tilting, then I'm just going to benefit through reciprocality. If the other guy's making bad betting decisions, I'm just going to benefit through that. If I am like the best 4-bet player in the world, like the other people are going to suffer out through reciprocality and everything like that. And it took something that is like this universal principle, right? And then it just like sticking it right into poker. It was awesome. I thought it was very, very cool as well. So I'm just going to keep hammering out and going through some of these other elements. Tommy talks a lot about at the beginning of kind of like keeping score and what our bankroll is, and the difference between like actual and theoretical and the money on the table versus kind of, what we actually should have and everything like that. And that's kind of almost a reciprocal thing itself. If we're supposed to be winning a certain amount and we do or don't get there. But anyway, he talks about just how important it is to keep track of an actual score and a theoretical score to know if we're doing well. Theoretically, you could be a huge donk and you won, the most amount of buy-ins you ever won last night is your actual score, but you played every hand wrong. To just understand things through an actual versus theoretical level, I thought was pretty cool. That was an element of poker that seems obvious now to talk about it through actual versus theoretical. But it was nice to hear someone like break it down like that.
The keeping score thing for me was a good thing that I'm actually kind of battling with myself currently, being I'm in a state of learning right now. So I want to go and sit down and try these new theories, new concepts that I'm learning and execute them. At the same time, though, I'm still trying to keep score. So I still want to maintain that high score. I need to look less at that score and more on the application of whatever I'm trying to execute, as opposed to letting them influence each other like they do for me personally. It's like, I might have did it wrong. I don't know. But I see my score come down. Like, oh shit, but I'm learning, so finding that balance is something I'm working on.
Oh, it's incredible when you put it through that context, because the game itself is not even like the money is almost like an afterthought. If you're just making good decisions and the money just flows your way, instead of thinking like, oh, I'm going to make the best money decision. It's just kind of crazy when you start thinking about like the theoretical versus actual kind of difference in lens to view everything through. So Tommy also talks a lot about how brutal the rake is, which it is. Poker sites are just really punishing players through the rake. So having an understanding of where you're playing and kind of the rake that you're paying, any kickbacks that you may get are really, really important to know as well. I'm going to speed up a little bit just because I didn't realize we're coming close to the end of the Zoom session. He talks about the profit premise, which is, I thought, really important as well, too. I mean, everyone says that, when they were going into a coaching session with him, of all the reasons that they want to get better, it's not always to make more money. And if you think about it, most players aren't going to be long-term profitable players in poker. So you have to have other reasons that you love the game, the competition, just the love of the game itself. Like it's just cool, the camaraderie, just all kinds of stuff like that. So I thought that was very interesting to put it out there that, everyone wants to get better at poker, and that can look at like a lot of different things, but not everyone is going to be like an insanely profitable player. So you have to just find what other reasons that you love to play the game, and focus on kind of some reasons like that.
It isn't just that you need to find other reasons to play. It's that you have other reasons to play, and if you don't understand them, they can bite you in the ass.
Yeah. Yeah, that exactly. That's a really good point. You just may really want to go because it's like, every Friday night you're hanging out with the guys and just like that's a fun thing to do. And it doesn't matter if you went out to a bar or you went to a home game, you consider your $100 like that's your entertainment fee for the night and everything like that. And then understanding what you're doing and while you're playing there may make that $100, like if you lose it, sting a little bit more or make it more joyful. That you're realizing that it's entertainment money on some level and everything like that. So that kind of led into decisions and mistakes. And Tommy talks about the only really way to make better decisions is the only way to get better at poker is to just improve your decisions. And there's always tons of decisions. There's on table decisions, there's off table decisions. When we start really not knowing how to make decisions in poker or knowing anything about it, and over time we just continue to refine and make better decisions basically, and hopefully less mistakes, because there are basically betting mistakes and non-betting mistakes. So over time, to get better at poker, we refine our decisions to make better and better ones, and we make less and less mistakes, hopefully. So maybe one of you guys, I had one of the questions here. Tommy says, no matter how good you are at poker, there will always be your gray area. Can you kind of explain maybe what he meant by that through the lens of just decisions in poker and mistakes?
Well, for me, it's the go for it concept. Like I got 2 outs, and if I hit, the glory that I will receive is so profound that I must go for it. That's a terrible idea, but that need for speed sometimes.
It feels good, man. Oh yeah. So yeah, but yeah, to then know yourself exactly. Like, you got to know what is like pushing and pulling you on something like that for sure.
For me, what I understand what Tommy means by the gray area is it's like where the most arguments happen online is about the things that matter least, and Tommy is bringing his Buddhist perspective to it. It's those arguments where you get attached to your position and attachment leads to suffering, blah, blah, blah. But another way to think about it is that a lot of these gray area spots are, in the modern GTO perspective, they're mixes. They're where both paths are right. The solver tells you they both have plus EV, and the reasons for doing more of one than the other have more to do with stuff further down the game tree than the here and now. They're both right, and you're not going wrong by betting here instead of checking. But
it's such a relief to be in those spots where you can think and you can work up such a strong conviction for why betting is right, and someone else can do the exact same thing and tell you why a fold is right, or a raise even. And then you realize, yeah, this is actually just a mixed spot, and the reason it's so debatable is because the EVs are just so darn close, and it's not like either way, if it's that contentious, you're not really going in the wrong. It's very close decisions that matter the least, because they're that close or that inconsequential. It's not like making an argument for folding aces pre-flop that'll just be terrible all the way down. In a spot that's close, it's really, really cool. And I find it a huge relief to just realize that, like, if the EVs are that close, even though I'm like a staunch for getting it all in here, and the other person's maybe like, they think that's a huge mistake and it's a fold. If the EVs are really that close, it's almost inconsequential, because when it's a mix like that, you're going to do well choosing either decision, which I think is like a really cool lens to look at things through. So yeah, I thought that, yeah, the close decisions mattering least was like a very, very kind of important thing that he talks about. So moving on, he talks a little bit about, well, he talks a lot about tilt, and making it less often and less severe, and that we're all tilters, and that, you know, kind of dealing with that in the ways that we have is one of the most important things that we can do, because tilt takes us away from our A game and kind of turns us into just, you know, versions of people that we don't want to be at all. And so yeah, there's like hard tilt and soft tilt and on the table tilt and off table and all these things that we can do that are you know, mess with our emotions and cause us to kind of like blow up and not play our A game. And so I realize, like, when I'm tilting, it's just like when I'm not hitting hands a lot, I get kind of frustrated by that. And I actually then start playing a lot more passively. I want to, instead of doing anything else, I try to like wait and try to like, oh, just try to hit more hands instead of do more things like try to realize equity or bluff a little bit more. Um, and sometimes I can pretty obviously like define that when once I'm start tilting and then kind of emotionally correct, but sometimes I don't realize that I'm tilting when I'm playing a session for a little bit. So I was wondering what your guys' relationships are with tilting. Was this book helpful at all in identifying maybe some of your tilt? And you know, anything, any comments you guys have on that?
Yeah, well, for me anyway, it was the way he approached it is very vulnerable. It's I'm human, I have done it. Here's why you should work at it and think about it and accept that you do the things you do so you can adjust them. So that was the most profound part, was you're gonna do it. I've done it. I'm you know, I'm the guy that's been around forever and I've done it. Here's how to recognize it. And the important thing is more awareness that you are doing it and allowing yourself to adjust based on acceptance of who you are, kind of thing.
Right on. Great point. Yeah, everyone's going to do it. So, you know, why not beat yourself? Why not cultivate a better relationship with it? Because everyone's going to do it, right? Instead of, you know, let it dominate you, at least understand it better, right? For this natural
I
thing.
I've I'm a I have been a terrible tilter, and recognizing it is one of the biggest problems with my game. And I put a lot of work into understanding it even before I read the book, which was like 11 years ago. Um, I was putting a lot of work into recognizing tilt signs and tilt signals inside of me. What kinds of thoughts are tilty thoughts, and trying to find